Mr. Durst is present with Mr. DeGuerin and Mr. Chestnut. Council of People are present, led by Mr. Balian. Mr. Balian, what will you be presenting next?
The testimony of Randall Burrows, live.
A witness who's present?
Yep.
All right, you may call your witness.
We're doing the full spread today of reading, stipulations, video, and live.
Okay.
Please stand and please stand. Raise your right hand to be sworn. Do you solemnly state that the testimony you may give and the cause now pending before this court shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? So help you God. Thank you, sir. Please be seated. Please state and spell your first and last name.
Randall, R-A-N-D-L-E, Burrows, B-U-R-R-O-W-S.
Thank you, sir.
You may proceed.
Thank you. Good morning.
Morning.
So what do you do for a living?
I retired from the Galveston County Sheriff's Office as a lieutenant, but now work part-time for the Galveston County Medical Examiner's Office as a death investigator.
Right. For how long have you been retired and working as a death investigator?
I retired almost 11 years ago, but I've been doing the death investigations part-time for about 15 years.
So let's go back to your work at the Sheriff's Office in Galveston County. What did you do there?
My last 2 years, I was a lieutenant in charge of the Marine Division and Dive Team and Patrol Division. Before that, I worked in investigations, including narcotics, homicide, burglary, robbery, everything.
When you worked for the Sheriff's Department, how many years total was that?
32 years.
And how many years in investigations?
28.
Did that include homicide investigations?
Yes.
When you work currently for the medical examiner's office as a death investigator,
Yes.
just very briefly, what does that entail?
The death investigator for the medical examiner's office basically is the eyes and ears for the doctors that perform autopsies. When the doctor sees the deceased, it's laying on a table. He has no idea, or she has no idea what happened with this deceased person. So we go to the scenes, we process the scenes, we photograph it, we document, we reports and so forth. That way when the doctor gets our reports and sees the photographs, has some idea of what happened out on that scene.
Do you have some basic training for that position in human anatomy?
Yes.
Have you recovered body parts as part of that job function?
Oh, yes.
Okay. I want to talk about your dive experience. You mentioned something about for 2 years you did something with diving. What is that?
Well, I was a commander of the dive team, Marine Division and dive team for the last 2 years, but I was part of the dive team and the dive team leader for about 10 years with the Sheriff's Office.
So let's talk about what the dive team is. What the dive team at the Sheriff's Office in Galveston County, what are they responsible for?
The dive team is actually responsible for tributaries, Galveston Bay, and anywhere we're assigned to go, bodies of water where items get thrown in there that don't belong there. And it's our job to go in there and make a recovery and process that as potential evidence and get it out of the water.
So I'm not going to limit you specifically to your work on the dive team with the sheriff. I just want to know in general, what your diving experience is. When did you start diving?
I started diving back in the 80s, in the mid 80s, and that's when we started informally diving, recreationally diving, and so forth, and formed a definite team.
And have you received training to dive?
Oh, yes.
Is there specific training you've had in terms of searching, in terms of a diver?
Yeah, I was actually an instructor and taught diving, both recreational and public safety diving.
And for how many years did you teach?
Oh, another 10, 11 years.
And when you say public safety diving, what does that encompass?
Public safety diving is just that. That's what dive teams are supposed to do. That's public safety diving as opposed to recreational diving, which is going out and looking at lovely fish and corals and stuff. Public safety diving is diving in water that most people don't want to go in.
Do you do that too, recreational diving?
Oh, absolutely.
Is there any recreational diving going on in the Gulf of in Galveston Bay?
Not in Galveston Bay, no.
Okay. So I'm going to take you back. Well, before I do that, how many dives do you think you've successfully completed?
Thousands.
How about searches? Diving searches?
If I'd logged every one of them, I'd be doing several dive books, but 500 or so at least.
Okay. And when you say you were on their head of the dive team for the sheriffs in Galveston, I want to take you back to the year 2001. How many people were on that dive team?
That particular, I think we had seven on our team.
Okay. And you were the head of that team?
Yes.
As the head of the team, did you coordinate the dives and figure out exactly what was going to happen?
Yes, plan the dives.
Were you present during the dives?
Yes.
Did you give instructions on what each person's part would be?
Yes.
Did you participate in the dives?
Yes.
All right. So I'm going to take you back to this case, the case of the recovered body parts from Morris Black in Galveston. You familiar with what I'm talking about?
Yes,
And did you become involved in this case?
I did.
How so?
The original call came to the Galveston Police Department. Their dive team was dispatched and realized that the scene was relatively large area, so they called the sheriff's office for assistance, which is commonplace. I mean, we work together all the time in these dive scenes because more people is better as far as that goes.
And when you arrived, had you been informed that body parts had already been recovered from the water?
Yes.
All right. Those were already removed by the time you got there?
I think there were some that were still in, that had not been removed from the scene, so I got to look at where they were, where they washed up and so forth, but some of them had already been removed.
All right. And was it just yourself, or did you have your entire dive team there?
Oh, the whole team was there.
And was it just the sheriff's dive team that was involved in this particular search, or was there other dive teams?
No, it was the Sheriff's Department dive team who was assisting the Galveston Police Department dive team.
Okay. And the Galveston Police Department had their own separate and distinct dive team?
Yes.
How many people approximately were on scene from Galveston dive team?
8 or 9, maybe 10.
Okay. And were you at some point told what in particular you were looking for?
Oh, yes.
What were you told?
We were looking for any pieces of evidence, but also the head.
Okay, a human head?
Yes.
All right. So did you, first of all, let's describe this area where this search took place. Could you just briefly describe for this jury where this body of water is in relation to Galveston Island?
Galveston Bay is the area between Galveston Island and the mainland of Galveston County. It is has ship channels, the Texas City Ship Channel, the Houston Ship Channel, and the Intracoastal Waterway. But it also is an area of recreational use for fishermen and so forth that is north of Galveston Island, but south of the mainland, if that makes sense.
So this is part of the Gulf of Mexico?
It's attached to the Gulf of Mexico.
Okay, and it's called Galveston Bay?
Yes.
All right. So you have Galveston Island, and then you have mainland Texas, and there's a body of water that separates the two of those.
Correct.
And that's the Galveston Bay?
Yes.
Okay. And in particular, which side of the island were you guys searching?
We were on the north side of the island, in the bay proper, between the mainland and Galveston Island. So it'd be the north shore of Galveston Island.
I'm going to show you page 1 of what's been marked as People's 184. Do you recognize that area in that photograph?
I do.
And is this the north side of the island that you searched?
Yes.
Do you see that red circle on this?
Yes.
And in particular, is that the area that you were asked to search?
Yes.
Okay. I'm showing you what's been marked as photo 2, page 2 on People's 184. this another view of that same particular area?
Yes.
Okay. So, before we talk about your search, I just want to ask you a few questions about what the water conditions are like in this area. Let's start first with water movement. The movement of water, currents, whatever you want. What's the proper term?
Well, water movement can be determined as far as currents and wave action and tidal flow.
Okay, so what's the water movement like in this particular area on the north side of Galveston Island where this body of water you searched was?
The movement of the water basically depends on the wind direction and also the amount of tide that is rising and falling. It all depends on what time of year and so forth.
So compared to the, say, you go to an area where there's a beach area and you see waves on the beach, something someone would typically experience. Is the movement of water like that in this area in Galveston Bay?
No, it's pretty much along the shore. It's pretty much based on wind currents as far as moving that water towards the shore or away from the shore.
Okay, so are you saying for the most part, the movement of water in this particular area is dependent on the wind conditions?
Yes.
Is it your testimony that, based on your experience, how many times have you dove in Galveston Bay in this particular area?
In that particular area, that day was the only time we dove in that area. But I've dove in Galveston Bay hundreds of thousands, almost 500 or so times.
Okay. And in Galveston Bay, is the movement of the water dependent on the wind conditions? Or is it more this particular area on the north side of this island?
It's difficult to say. In that particular instance, the movement of the water was not that great but it was because of the wind direction. However, there are certain times when currents can be generated from outflow from a lot of rain coming out of the Trinity River or from any of the other, and then also tidal movements out in the channel area. But along that area right there at that particular time, it was all wind generated.
So let's talk about this particular area that you searched. This particular time period you searched. Were you on Galveston Island at this period of time? In
Yes.
The days surrounding the search?
Yes.
And so I want to talk about from September 28th to the day you searched. Are you familiar with what the weather and wind conditions and water conditions were in this area at that particular time?
Yes.
Okay, what was it?
We had a norther blow through, and the wind was actually coming out of the north, blowing from north to south, which was blowing into the shoreline. So the waves that were being generated were actually coming towards the shoreline.
So at that particular time, from the 28th of September to the time when you searched, if you look at the exhibit that's on the screen that you were previously shown, if you're standing on that, let's just take that concrete bulkhead that's sticking out the end of that landmass. Do you see that?
Yes.
You're standing at the end of that concrete bulkhead and you're with your back to the land and your face to the ocean. Which way would the wind be blowing?
Blowing right in my face.
Okay. So then, which way was the water movement in this particular area during that period of time from the 28th of September when you searched?
Towards the shore.
So let's say a kid went out there and threw a toy boat in the water at the end of that concrete bulkhead, then which direction would that toy boat move?
It's going to come towards the shore.
Okay, any doubt about that?
No doubt.
Okay. And what about something that sunk to the bottom in that particular area? If you hooked it out there at that period of time, if it's light enough to be able to move on the bottom, which way is it going to move?
Well, it's going to go towards the shore, but if it sinks to the bottom, it's probably going to stay pretty close to where it sunk to the bottom.
Okay, so are you saying there's more movement of the water at the surface than at the bottom in this particular area?
Yes. Yes.
So then the wind affects the movement of the surface of the water, but down towards the bottom, it doesn't move as much.
Right. And of course, as deeper as you go, the less effect the wind is going to have.
Okay.
But so close to shore where it's very shallow, you're going to have more effect. But if you're in the deeper water, say 5 or 6 feet, you're not going to have wind affect the movement of the object.
So if something in this period of time, from the 28th forward to when you searched, was thrown and did sink, And if there was enough movement at the bottom, wherever it was, to move it, which direction would it get moved?
It's going to go to the shore, go towards the shore,
Any doubt about that?
no doubt.
So we've talked about the water conditions in terms of movement of the water and the wind conditions. Can you describe for the jury what's the visibility like in this particular area, the water visibility?
Well, as you can see from that picture, it's not very clear. We, as divers, we're referred to as mud divers. We're referred to as chocolate milk divers because every bit of the water in Galveston Bay that we dive in is zero visibility. You can't see anything with your eyes. It's all done with your hands.
Okay, so this is not a recreational diving area?
No, not at all.
All right. Let's talk about the bottom, underneath the water. You walk out there. What's the bottom like?
It's going to be mostly sand. After all, Galveston Island is a barrier island, so it's predominantly sand. But as the water doesn't move, it's going to build up some silty characteristics, but it's predominantly sand.
And is this soft packed sand, hard packed sand? If I'm walking out there, what's it going to feel like?
It's pretty hard. I mean, you may sink down a couple inches, but it's not like it's wading in the mud. It's pretty firm.
And is there a rocky aspect to it?
Along the shoreline, yes. Those rocks that are there are actually placed there by man-made or by man. They weren't there naturally.
So I'm showing you what's been marked as page 21 of this same exhibit, 184. Is this a picture at low tide of the same exact area that we're talking about where you searched?
Yes.
And you see how near the edges towards the concrete surface sides, there are some rocks placed there?
Yes.
And then the rest of it appears to be sand. Is this fairly and accurately depict what you're talking about?
Absolutely, yes.
In terms of the bottom?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. So if it's full of water and I'm walking out there, you say my feet might sink a short amount.
Yeah, a couple of inches, probably. You're going to hit something solid. You get solid sand.
And is it, like, I've been to the beach and walked around on the beach, not in the water, and are we talking like that soft of sand or more firm?
Well, the beach in Galveston is different than a beach in California.
Oh, okay.
So,
Which one would I rather go to?
I can tell you, California.
Go ahead.
it's firm sand. It's not a white sand by any means, but it's not powder.
So if something sinks to the bottom, how heavy does it have to be in order to sink completely into the sand where you're not going to see it anymore?
In this particular area, it would take it a long while to sink below the surface of the sand.
Okay. You said you've recovered body parts before. Have you ever been involved in an investigation where a human head was recovered?
Yes.
And are you familiar, as part of your investigation with the coroner's office, you're familiar with the characteristics of a human head?
Yes.
The weight of a human head?
Yes.
If a human head was thrown into water, would it float or sink from your...
It's going to sink.
It's going to sink, okay. Is that because there's not a lot of cavity areas to hold air?
Correct.
Okay. If a human head was thrown in this area and sunk to the bottom, given your experience, the weight of this head, would it sink below the sand so you couldn't see it?
No.
No. Any chance of that?
No. It's going to be right there.
Okay. So, how deep, now let's talk about the depth. How deep is the water out in this particular area?
Well, you can see from that picture right there, that's right there along the shoreline, inches deep. But as you go out, it has a gradual grade that would go out probably at the end of the pier. We may be looking at 4 to 5 feet. And then farther out, you may get to 7 feet.
So would you describe this as a very deep area,
No,
Galveston Bay?
not at all.
Showing you what page 2 of the same exhibit. So you're saying as you get to the end of that concrete extension on the left, I'm calling it a concrete bulkhead. You understand what I'm referring to?
Yes, I do.
And as you get to the end of that, it's maybe how many feet deep?
4 to 5 feet.
Okay. And to the right of that, you see the protrusion there. It looks like some sort of rocky.
I do.
Okay. Is that like a how would you describe that?
That's
What
a
is that?
collapsed fishing pier.
Okay. Again, same depth in that whole area.
Yes.
So when you say you search this area as a diver, you're not going down very deep diving.
No, not at all.
Okay. All right. So I'd like to talk about what you did. What were your responsibilities in terms of this search?
Well, we divided the entire crime scene up into 2 sections. One section, the Galveston Sheriff's Office dive team is going to search, and the other section, the Galveston Police Department dive team is going to search. Now, that being said, both of our teams are trained the same, strictly because we work together so much, so we all went through the same training. That way, if they were short a diver, one of my divers could just step right in, and we actually even use the same type of equipment. That way, it's all interchangeable. So if we get a bigger scene, that we could all work together as one scene, as one unit. But this particular time, we divided it up into 2. Like I said, the Galveston Police Department team dove to the left of that pier.
So are you talking about this area here?
Yes, they dove to the left and towards shore,
Okay. How far south towards the shore did they go?
all the way till the water was like inches deep, where you could see what was on the bottom.
Okay. And how far out were they searching from the?
About 20 yards past the end of that pier.
Okay. So they searched the whole area about 20 yards to the left of this pier.
Well, they actually went out farther, going to the left of the pier. They went out probably 75 to 100 feet. That's what our ropes are set at, outside the pier. But towards the north, they only went out about 20 yards.
I'll say when you say the north beyond this.
North, yes,
Okay. Towards the open water.
correct.
Okay. And which area was your team responsible for?
We were responsible for the area between the 2 piers. We searched that area, and actually we actually went around that pier on the right a little bit too, but we searched out into the more open water beyond the piers.
How far out beyond the piers did you guys go?
20, 30, 40 yards, something along that line.
So as a leader of the dive team, and with the background training and experience that you have, did you search an area that you deemed sufficient given the wind and water conditions at the time, given what object you knew you were looking for?
Yes,
Okay. In other words, why didn't you go further out towards the open water?
wouldn't have been out there.
Okay. If it had been thrown out there and moved, which direction would it have moved?
Moved towards the shore.
And you searched the entire area from 20 to 30 yards out past those piers all the way into the shore.
Correct.
And you searched that entire area between those 2 piers.
Yes.
And you searched around that smaller pier.
Well, the other team did, yes. Oh, the smaller pier, yes, you're right.
And the other team searched the area, I'm looking at this photograph, to the left of the larger pier.
Yes.
Okay. Were you satisfied, based on your background training experience, that in total this entire area that was searched was sufficient to find what you were looking for?
Yes.
So describe the search. You can't see down there, so what are you doing?
Basically, everything's done by feel. The diver is crawling along the bottom, and it is feeling the objects that are on the bottom. And anytime he runs into something, he tries to identify it. And in this particular case, if it's something that maybe a rock that's the appropriate size, he could actually stand up and look at it because it was that shallow. But for the most part, they're swimming or crawling along the bottom, feeling the bottom to see what they can find.
So you could stand up out of the water?
Oh, yes. Yeah, for the most part. It was like 4 or 5 feet right there. Now, as we got deeper, we couldn't. As we got deeper, we couldn't.
Are you using like snorkels, or do you have dive tanks?
No, we full dive gear.
Okay, so you're able to just focus your efforts on your search and not worry about breathing?
Correct.
Okay. I mean, not that you're not worried about breathing, but right. You weren't deep enough to get the bends, right? You didn't have to
No, not at
time
all.
your dives? Okay. So how do you know, do you take any precautions to make sure you know you're searching every square inch?
Absolutely.
What do you do?
Well, we use primarily in a situation like this what's called a tether system. The diver, his sole responsibility is to swim along the line. He's got a tether that comes back to the shore. That tender that holds he's the anchor that holds on to the line. He controls where that diver searches. So that diver is swimming along an arc from starting, for example, inside the bulkhead there. If he's standing right there on where the water meets the shore right there. He's standing right there. He's controlling the diver who's swimming in an arc, swimming away and out into deeper water. So when he gets to the end, the diver stops, or the tender stops him. He lets a little line out, comes back along the line. He stops him when he gets to the shore, lets a little more line out, and you do that all the way out. And once you've completed the distance that we're looking for, you then move the tender to another location and start the process over again, overlapping a lot of the area that's already been searched, which is the main reason we do that.
Let me ask you, so I just know tetherball. Have you ever played tetherball?
Sure.
Okay, so tetherball's got like a metal pole in the middle, and there's a rope attached to it with a ball at the end, and you hit the ball, and the goal is to try to get to circle the pole so there's no more rope, right?
Right.
Okay. So the pole in the tetherball example, would that be what the person you're describing as the tender?
Yes.
Okay. So the tender is at the end of the rope, controlling how far that diver is going to be out. Would the diver be the ball in my example?
Yes.
Okay. And so as the diver is at the end of the rope, in my tetherball example, would the diver be swimming back and forth as far as he can with the ropes allowing him?
Yes.
And when he does that complete arch, would the pole person, what's the pole person called?
The tender.
The tender. Would the tender let out a little more rope and say, okay, swim that arc again?
Yes.
To go back and forth again?
Yes.
And then the tender would let out a little more rope and let him go back and forth again?
Yes.
So is the diver continuing to swim back and forth in an arc, and the arc gets larger and larger and larger until the entire area is covered?
Correct.
And then you move the pole or the
The
tender,
tender, yeah, move it to another location, which we map it out and figure out where we're going to go.
and then you pull the rope in and bring the diver close?
Start over again.
So the diver literally starts like right next to you going back and forth and then goes further and further out.
Yes.
Okay. And you do that from enough points where you're going to cover this entire area.
Yes.
And in fact, from your testimony, you're going to do it in a way that you're going to actually have a bunch of overlaps. So the same area may get covered more than one time.
Correct.
And this was the procedure that you used for the area that your team searched?
Yes.
And did you see the Galveston team doing their search as well?
Absolutely.
And did they follow the same protocols and use the same system?
Yes.
All right. By the way, even though you're separate entities, were you guys basically working as one coordinated team?
Absolutely. We know them. They know us. We know them. So we're interacting with each other the whole time.
Okay. And I assume then if their team had found a head, you would know about it?
Absolutely.
Okay. There'd be some kind of commotion and probably everyone would want to go look, right?
Yes.
Okay. So when the diver, the ball in my example, is conducting their arc search, they're literally like on prone position, laid out, feeling the bottom?
Yes.
Okay.
Mostly with a sweeping motion with their hands,
Okay.
feeling along the bottom.
Are you confident, based on your background, training, your experience, and what you saw that day, that all these areas you described were completely and thoroughly searched?
Yes.
Did you find a head?
No.
Did the Galveston team find a head?
No.
No one found a head.
That's correct.
If a head was dumped, let's assume that these body parts were found between those two bulkheads. You were told generally where these body parts were found?
Yeah. Oh, yes. Yeah.
Okay. And assume someone threw those body parts off of that pier on the left there. First of all, if they throw it at the end of the pier, the body parts could go either direction from that pier.
Yes.
They can go to the left or to the right. Yes?
Yes, they could.
if you're standing on that bulkhead, you could throw some to the right, some to the left.
Sure.
Okay. Were you satisfied, based on the search that you conducted, strike that, if someone had thrown those body parts at the same spot at the same time, with the head thrown in at the same spot at the same time, would you have found the head?
Absolutely.
You have any doubt about that?
No doubt.
So in your opinion, was that head thrown in the same spot at the same time as those other body parts?
No.
Any doubt about that whatsoever?
No. Because if it had been done there, we'd have found it.
What about marine animals? Was there any marine animals that live in this bay area that could have carried that head away?
The only marine animals that might be there in that area would be blue crabs, which are about the size of my hand at biggest. They're not going to move a head. They may eat on it, but they're not going to move it.
Any doubt about that?
No.
There's no giant crabs in Galveston Bay that could
No.
have carried that head away?
Despite the picture of the one on front of Guido's, that was not the one caught in Galveston Bay.
Okay. What about like sharks? Are there sharks at this time in this area?
Not in that vicinity, no.
No.
Maybe farther out in the channel and stuff, but not in that. It's too shallow for them to be up in there.
Okay. So do you have any doubt in your mind whatsoever, based on what you did and what you saw, that that head was not deposited in the well?
No doubt.
Assuming it was not deposited at the same time with those other body parts? Any doubt about that?
It was not deposited in that area before we were there.
Of course, it's possible that somebody deposited all the stuff at one time and then ripped open one of the bags, came back later, and took the head.
It's possible.
That's pure speculation. Speculation.
Overall?
That's possible.
Okay, that would be another explanation for not having a head there, right?
Yeah, before we got there, yeah.
Okay. Any other scenario where you can conceive of why that head would not be found?
Those two. It was thrown and recovered and removed, or it wasn't thrown at all.
Okay. What about a slope? Is there a slope in that area, like away from shore, where the head could have rolled on the bottom away?
No, it doesn't really. It's a gradual grade to go down. It's very. It's not. I wouldn't even call it a slope.
Given your knowledge of a human head, if it had been thrown in and sunk to the bottom, would it have been in your search area?
Yes, it would have been there.
Okay. And you didn't find it?
Did not find it.
Thank you. Nothing further?
Cross-examination.
Good morning, Mr. Burrows. I'm Dick DeGuerin, and I represent Bob Durst along with my co-counsel. We've never met, have we?
Oh yes, we have.
Really? When?
I've gone up against you many times in Galveston County.
In other cases?
Yes.
Okay. Well, maybe it's the mask.
Probably, and the hair too. I had longer hair back then.
Longer than that?
Quite a bit longer, actually.
Okay. Well, now you got me thinking about trying to remember what case it was. Well, maybe we'll spend a few minutes when we don't waste the jury's time about that. At any rate, how long had the bags been in the water, if you know, before you started your search?
I do not know.
You started your search on what day, please?
It would be, I guess, September the 29th, that evening, I believe, 2001. The 30, okay, a long time ago.
I was gonna look at the reports, I thought it was the 30th. So I think we can
We'll
stipulate.
stipulate it was the 30th.
And it was at night?
It was in the evening, yes.
Okay. Do you know when the bags that contained the other body parts were found?
No, when I got the call to go out there, the Galveston Police Department was already on the scene, and in fact, the medical examiner was already there as well. And those recoveries had been made before
Okay.
I got there.
If there's information that it was about 6 o'clock in the evening when the boy and his stepfather discovered the torso, would that be consistent with what you know?
Sure.
All right, so you were there 4 to 6 hours after
Yes.
the discovery of the bags, right?
Correct.
And I take it that your search took hours
Very much so, yeah.
How-
Into the next day.
into the next morning? You have to answer
Yes,
audibly.
yes.
And you said that there was a norther that had blown in.
Correct.
Now, we might have to explain out here in California what a norther is. And maybe we even explain what a blue norther is. It's cold air that comes down from the north blowing toward the south. Is that a apt description?
Fair, yes.
There's a saying in Texas that there's nothing but barbed wire fence between there and the North Pole. You've heard that, haven't you?
I have.
When did the norther blow in?
I don't remember.
You mentioned that the wind is an influence on the movement of water, and there was a north wind at the time you were there. I believe it says beginning at 2000 hours. That'd be 8 o'clock, right?
Sure. I mean, that's.
Military
2000
time,
hours.
2000 hours. is-
2000 hours is 8 o'clock, but
Okay, that PM, right?
yes.
Had the norther blown in that day?
When I got there that evening and was looking and evaluating the scene about what we were going to do, the wind was blowing in my face as I was standing on the bulkhead.
Okay.
Time factor, I don't have a clue what time it was.
Are there published tide and current figures?
Yes,
Did you check those?
no,
And so we can understand that the published tide and current figures are done by the some national federal agency, right?
sure, they're done by, but they're also at a specific location, not that location. They're done for various locations, like the entrance to Galveston Bay, to the Texas City Dike, to the entrance to Clear Lake, these areas like this, but not at that specific location. So they're going to be off by a few hours.
But there are multiple locations where those measurements are taken and
Sure.
recorded and reported.
Yes,
And there are also forecasts as to the tides and currents, right?
correct.
And you did not check those either.
I did not.
So, were you aware that bags either containing body parts or evidence were found along on both sides of that concrete pier,
Yes,
and that one set of bags in particular, 3 bags, were found some 500 feet or 500 paces away from where the torso was found.
Okay.
Were you aware of that?
No.
Is it correct that there were bags that were found on both sides of the pier that we're looking at?
Yes.
All right. And were you aware that there was a set of bags, 3 that appeared to have been in each other, that were empty of body parts?
At the time, I was not aware, but I am now.
Okay, you've been made aware of it at
Yes.
some time. When were you made aware of that?
Oh, gosh, a number of years ago, but it was somewhat after it was, I guess, it would have been before the trial in Galveston.
All right. Now, you did not testify in the trial in Galveston, did you?
Correct.
Did they tell you you weren't going to testify because they'd found some empty bags?
No.
The empty bags had tears in them, or slits in them, that were from 2.5 to 3 feet big. Did you know that?
I had heard that, yes.
If one of those bags, or if they were concentric, that is, one bag inside another bag inside another bag, and they all had that slit in it, if the head had been in that'd be plenty of room for a head to come out of the bag, wouldn't it?
Depends on how long the slits were.
2.5 to 3 feet.
I'd have to look at. I can't make a decision based. I can't make a decision based on your description.
Okay, well, let me tell you that we've stipulated, that we've agreed, right before you testified, that the slits in those bags were from 2.5 to 3 feet. 2.5 to 3 feet. I'm just guessing with my hands right now. That's plenty big enough for a head to come out of that bag, right?
Okay.
Is it?
I guess it's possible.
Now, the wind is one factor in the movement of the water, but tides are also a factor in the movement of water, right?
Correct.
And as a longtime Galveston resident, you know that the tides can be several feet. That is, raising and lowering of the water several feet.
Oh, in extreme circumstances, yes, but for the most part, the tidal flow is not more than a foot and a half at the most.
And the tides operate several times a day, don't they?
In some cases, yes.
Well,
There are times that there's only one tide a day in a 24-hour period.
okay. Did you check to see how many tides there had been that day or preceding that day when you were out there?
I did not.
Was the tide coming in or going out when you were out there diving?
Don't know.
Or did it change while you were there?
I don't recall.
Now, the picture that's on the screen, what number is that? Yeah.
Page 2 of
People's Exhibit 184.
Okay. The picture's on the screen. That almost looks like blue water, doesn't it?
Yeah.
That's not what that's not what the water in Galveston Bay looks like, is it?
Not routinely, no.
Or on that day.
The water that we were in was pretty muddy.
And by pretty muddy, you mean maybe you can see an inch or so in front of
Yeah,
your
not
face
even
mask?
that.
Not even that far?
Not even that.
Okay. So you're relegated to having to feel
Yes.
the bottom of the water.
Bottom. Yeah. The bottom. Yes.
And it's true, isn't it, that Galveston Bay is very large, but it's also very shallow.
For the most part, yes.
And by very large, we're talking about miles and miles across at places, aren't we?
Correct.
Let me, if we can, got a couple of maps here. Let me make sure that we can agree. We'll mark these.
Want me to move these?
Yeah. Could I have a defendant's exhibit number, please, ma'am?
Counsel, D as in David.
D is in David?
Yes, sir.
John, I'd like to mark three charts as D, 1, 2, and 3. All right. So here's D1. I'm assuming you're familiar with nautical charts.
I am.
And does that appear to be a nautical chart of Galveston Island, part of Galveston Bay, which would be the beginning of the East Bay, and well, is that what that is?
Yes.
All right. Now, the area where you searched is toward the north side of Galveston Island. About, can you point to it on that screen? I think it is about in here, isn't it?
No, that's,
Tell me where to move the pen.
that's gonna be where the causeway is, and move farther to your right and up, right around in there, I believe.
Okay,
Yeah, I believe that's it right there.
all right. I'm just going to put a circle around that general area. Is that about correct?
I believe so, yes.
All right. Now, of that area, you searched, of course, we don't have a scale here. You searched as much as 75 to 100 feet out from the shoreline,
Yes,
but no further.
no further.
And so what's out here?
It's pretty much all open water. A lot of fishermen like to go out in there and drift fish. And there's actually another channel up farther, obviously, where it says 6.9, 5.9. That's an old channel that comes into this, where Pier 77 channel is right there. So it's pretty much all open water, just shallow.
Okay, in fact, that open water goes all the way up to, I'll mark this as D3. This is a little bit larger perspective of the Galveston Bay area and Galveston Island, where I'm pointing being Galveston Island, correct?
Correct.
And Galveston Bay being this blue part that's East Galveston Bay, and West Galveston Bay down toward the west. Is that
Actually, this is West Bay here.
right?
East Bay is up above Bolivar Peninsula.
Uh-huh.
And then Galveston Bay is right there in the center and goes up towards Trinity Bay and up in that area. That's all the Galveston Bay complex.
Right. So how many miles is it across? Let's first start across from where you did your search over to Texas City. That's probably the closest.
Well, where you're pointing, that's Pelican Island. Farther down.
Pelican is right here,
No, that's Pelican Island. The
Right.
search area is farther down.
right? About where I'm pointing now?
Kinda, but more to your left.
Well,
If you give, may I have the pointer?
I don't know if we've got a pointer.
We got one.
Will that work? Usually doesn't work on projection.
All right.
Perfect.
Oh,
Nice. Okay.
That's why his face mask says champ.
Put the other one back up.
who wants the other one, Dick?
Oh, you want the other one? Okay.
I'll show you about where are you referring to.
On the screen now will be D3. That's
Yes,
zoomed out.
This area here is Pelican Island, and this is where the causeway goes across to get to mainland to Galveston Island. So just north of there, around that G, I guess that's a G. Right at that vicinity is where we're talking about.
Okay. And so my question was, we can see Texas City
Oh,
here. How far is it from where you were, your search area, to Texas City?
several miles. I don't know exactly.
Between 3 and 5 miles?
Yeah, several miles.
Okay. So we have that perspective that if the search area is where we've circled, it's 3 to 5 miles across here. None of this was
Well-
searched, right?
Actually, this is the mainland right here.
Yes.
This is the railroad bridge and crosses to Galveston Island. So however, when you're talking about from here to the mainland as a direct line, it's not gonna be 3 to 5 miles, because the causeway is not 3 to 5 miles long. But it's at least 2 miles probably, maybe 1.5 miles.
Okay, so you searched at maximum 100 feet from the shore, but there's a couple of miles, several miles, depending on which direction you go, of open bay.
Yes.
Okay, of course, this nautical map doesn't have the highways or roads in Galveston, or in this neighborhood in Galveston, or any other road for that matter. But this brown area that's on the screen, that's all Galveston Island, right?
Correct.
And in fact, there's a blue area down here that's just a bio, or what we call a bio, Offutt's bio, right?
That's correct.
And here's another, a little bit more perspective. This will be D2. This is zoomed out a little bit. Offutt's bio is about where I'm pointing here, right?
Yes.
And that, but Galveston Island is on both sides of Offutt's bio.
Yes.
And the search area, again, was out here.
Correct.
Mr. Guerin's placed a circle on the.
Placed a circle on D3.
Okay, over, so it's like.
D2.
Is that D2 or D3? That's D2, you're right. Sorry. Okay, so this gives us a little bit more perspective about the distance between the search area and the rest of the bay, particularly the closest point of land would be about where I'm pointing, right?
Okay, yes.
And that's at least the length of the causeway, and the causeway is 2 miles?
Yeah, I don't know.
Okay. Did you ever go, how many days were you out there, by the way?
We was out there day and a half.
Okay. Did you ever go back and try to go further out into the bay?
No.
Is there commercial fishing activity out in the bay there?
Out in the bay, yes.
And that's like shrimp boats?
Yes,
Shrimp boats generally drag nets.
correct.
And how close to the shore do those shrimp boats get?
They are not very, because it's too shallow for them. They'd be running the shrimp boat aground.
Right. But then later out in the bay, there's 5 to 7 feet.
Farther away from land, yes. I mean, you're looking probably several hundred yards that they would stay offshore, which, quite honestly, I've never seen a shrimp boat there.
And
Yeah,
there are several channels that are cut through there. Is that right?
Yes.
Channels that are dredged.
Well, they used to be, not anymore.
I mean, particularly the Intercoastal Canal or the Intercoastal Waterway,
The intercoastal is, yes.
and that goes all the way from Jacksonville, Florida, to the tip of Texas in Brownsville, doesn't it?
Yes.
Big boats go on that,
Yeah, that runs right here.
right? And there's also the Houston Ship Channel, right?
Correct.
And the Texas City Ship Channel, right?
Yes.
And those are channels that are dug, dredged to depth enough for large boats, ships, to use them, right?
Yes.
To 40 feet, 50 feet?
No, I'm trying to remember what the, it's been so long. They're dredged to a certain depth, and I can't remember what it is, but it's probably 25 feet or so. Because the length of their vessels are limited as far as, and even our channels there are not meant to bring in the super tankers, which would have a much greater depth. But those ship channels are, I want to say 25 to 30 foot deep.
You're not talking about the Houston Ship Channel?
I'm talking about the Texas City Channel.
Yeah.
And Texas City Channel and the Intercoastal. The Intercoastal is 17 foot deep.
But that, probably not important, but that the Intercoastal accommodates tugboats and barges.
Correct.
So, as far as the search was concerned, to sum it up, you searched an area of how many, can you estimate how many square feet you searched?
I got a calculator, I can calculate it. I mean, you saw the area that I outlined, but just that area that I outlined on direct.
Right. Now, we know from something about the distance of where the bags that still had body parts in them were found, and the 3 bags that had the big slit in it were found. That was something like 500 paces away from and on the other side of the pier, right?
Like I said, I don't know where those were found.
We've had a stipulation about that.
Okay.
Assuming that they were found some 500 paces and on the other side of the pier, that means that those bags, if they were all thrown in at the same place, that means that those bags had traveled that far in the time between when they were thrown in and when you were there, right?
Well, that would actually make sense
Yeah.
due to the fact that there was nothing to hold them down at all. The wind, they were really subject to the wind. It's like throwing a feather into the wind. It's going to blow wherever it wants to blow.
But the answer is, that's correct. They had gone 500 paces, assuming that we have our stipulation. They'd gone 500 paces from the other bags,
Okay?
and they were empty, right?
Okay? Yes.
Did you know that?
I do now.
Okay. And did you know that they were found with Morris Black's blood in them?
I assumed that they were, yes.
Okay. I believe that's all.
Yes, please. When you say you searched 75 to 100 feet from the shoreline in response to Mr. DeGuerin's questions, I just want to be clear. When you say shoreline, you're talking about all shore protrusions, is that right?
Oh, yes.
So in other words, if you've got page 2 of People's 184, those 2 piers again, you search that entire area between those 2 piers
Yes.
and beyond the amount you've indicated.
Yes.
And then to the left side of it, looking at this photograph as well, was searched the distance you've already indicated.
Yes.
Okay. So, Mr. DeGuerin asked you why you didn't search the entire Gulf of Mexico, or not Gulf of Mexico, but Galveston Bay. You understand the question I'm talking about?
I do.
Why didn't you search the entire Galveston Bay?
When we got to that scene that day, that night, we met with the investigators, we met with the crime scene guys. Based on the information that we were given by them, we as a dive team prepared a plan. When I say prepared a plan, we divided the scene in half. Galveston police took one half and we took the other half. And in that plan, we decided how far out. And we were also limited the tether that I spoke about earlier. The line that is being held by the tender is 75 foot long. We have a 100-footer, but we don't like to use it because it becomes more cumbersome the farther out you go. We can use it, but it's more cumbersome the more length. So we made this plan, and every place that we put this tender, that's how far that guy searched.
And when you formulated this plan, did you take into consideration the water and wind conditions?
Sure.
So you could have certainly taken that rope 5 miles offshore into the shipping channels, right?
If we had a boat, we could have gone out there and, yes, sure.
Okay, so would you have gone out to the main body of water in the shipping channels and searched out there?
We didn't need to,
Okay, and why didn't you need to?
because the wind conditions, based on the information we received, the wind conditions, the water conditions at that time, the area that we searched, we would have found the head if it was there.
And what does the Galveston Bay drain into?
The Gulf of Mexico.
Okay, did you search the Gulf of Mexico?
Did not.
Why not?
Didn't need to.
Okay, so I want you to assume, so what you're saying is based on the wind conditions, anything that was in there thrown from that area, from that pier, would have blown back to shore.
Sure.
And you searched all the areas that would have contained items that floated in that area.
Yes.
Okay. If, as part of the sheriff's department, if a head was found on Galveston Island, would you become aware of that?
Yeah,
Okay. After that search, was any head ever found on the shoreline?
it was not.
Okay. I'm going to show you what's been marked as page 19 with People's 184. See that red circle area?
I do.
I want you to assume that that's the stipulated 500 paces to the east where this other bag was found. Can you orient yourself to where that was found in relation to the area you searched?
Yes.
Okay. And then I'm going to show you page 20 of the same exhibit, and that's actually an example, a photograph of these bags that were found in that area. So you see how these are found on a shore?
Yes.
Is that consistent with the wind and water conditions of what you're describing of where you would expect it to be found?
Yes.
Does it surprise you that one of the bags was found in that area,
No.
given the wind conditions?
Absolutely not.
And these bags float, right?
Yes.
Like a boy who throws a toy boat into the water, if the wind is pushing it, it's going to get pushed, right?
Correct.
I want you to assume, you know where the railroad tracks are?
I do.
Okay, I want you to assume that entire shoreline was searched from the area you searched all the way to the railroad tracks.
I do know that the shoreline was walked by Galveston police officers.
Yeah, I'm telling you, I want you to
Okay.
assume it was searched and no head was found, okay? Is there any other areas you could think of where that head would have gone?
If it had been thrown at that location, no.
No. Okay. And if it would have rolled, it would have, or moved underwater, it would have moved towards shore. Is that right?
Yeah, if it wouldn't have rolled, but yeah,
If it were floating in a bag, it would have floated to shore.
yes.
And no one found it.
No one found.
Thank you.
Anything else?
Briefly. Your search plan was based on the conditions you found at the time you went there.
Correct.
And the conditions at the time you went there, a norther had blown in at some time that you don't know, right?
Before I got there.
Right.
Yes.
And you don't know how long that had been.
No.
And so your plan and your conclusions are based on the conditions that you found when you were there.
And the items that had been recovered. That was part of the plan as well.
It's true, isn't it, that the prevailing wind in Galveston is from the southeast?
Correct.
Exactly the opposite of the norther that you found when you went there.
Correct.
That's all.
No, thank you.
May this witness be excused?
Yes.
You're excused, sir. Thank you. Excused?
Yes, thank you.
You'll wait 5 minutes, we can visit.
All right, I'll give you that chance now because we're going to break until 1:30. Ladies and gentlemen, do not converse among yourselves or with anyone else on any subject connected with this case. Do not form or express any opinion on the case. 1:30.